In November 2008 Thanksgiving weekend, I went to visit my grandma, who lives in a condo in Katy, Texas. It's a gated condo in a very upscale neighborhood. The condo has a full-time nursing staff, 24-hour security, and is extremely well lit. Any visitors must sign in at the front office and must show picture ID. At about midnight, my grandma turned in for the night. I wasn't tired at all, so I decided to check some emails on my laptop. About 45 minutes later, someone began knocking on the door. Almost immediately, I felt quite uneasy. It didn't take long before I found out why. Whoever was knocking did so persistently. Most people knock a couple of times and wait for a response. Not them. They knocked incessantly, like they knew I was awake. As I approached the door to look through the peephole, I was extremely surprised to see two young kids standing there. At this point, my uneasiness turned into dread. At first glance, they looked like two normal boys. The oldest of the two must have been no more than 16, the younger one maybe 12. Thinking they must have gone to the wrong condo, I began to unlock the door. The feeling I had, though, it stopped me from sliding the chain off the door. I opened the door with the chain still on and said, "Yes, may I help you?" The older boy did all the talking while the younger one looked down at his feet.
"Miss,"
he said,
"can we please come in to use the phone? Our ride never came for us, and we need to call our parents."
Before I could even reply, the older boy looked straight into my eyes, and what I saw sent shivers down my spine. Even now. Because the corridors are so brightly lit, I was able to see the boy in vivid detail. The boy's eyes were solid black. Not a speck of white anywhere. Strangely, as we made eye contact, I almost felt compelled to open the door. But I didn't. As I stood there, staring at these kids, the older boy spoke again. He began to demand to be let in, saying that it would only take a few minutes and then they would be gone. Instead, I told them to go out to the front office. Someone could help them there. I shut the door, locked all the locks, and made a call to the front desk to let them know there were a couple of kids roaming the complex, knocking on doors and trying to get inside. I don't know when they left my door. I was too afraid to look. I do know that after a thorough search throughout the complex, reviewing the sign-in sheets, they found nothing. None of the residents had any young visitors. Who they were and where they came from is something I'd rather not know. I told my grandma what happened, but I left out the terrifying part. I worry for her safety on a daily basis. If you don't know who the Black-Eyed Kids are, here's a little backstory on them. They're kids, usually teenagers, who will ask permission to come into your house or car and ask for a ride or to use your phone. They cannot enter without your permission. However, there have been some stories where people have been caught or followed by them out in the open at night. Their eyes are completely black and bring along a feeling of fear and terror with them. So here's how my whole situation started out. It was the summer of 2012. I was 13 and me and my two best friends were hanging out at my house. We decided to watch a bunch of movies late at night, but we wanted some candy. We told my parents we were going to go to the gas station, which is a 5-minute walk from my house, to get some candy and chips. While we reached the final house on my street before turning to head towards the gas station, me and my immature friends decided to ding-dong ditch a house. If you don't know what that is, it's when you ring someone's doorbell and run away and hide. We rang the doorbell once, and the owner opened the door and closed it. We decided we wanted a better reaction, and I rang the door a second time. As I was running across the street, this huge feeling of adrenaline took me over, and I have no idea why. After I dove into the bushes into my hiding spot, I repositioned myself to look at the house I had just ding-dong ditched. This time, the man came out and looked around his yard. He began to cross the street and just stopped dead in his tracks. And I don't mean it was like a, hey, I'll just do with it later stop. It was like a, holy fuck stop. Me and my friends were ready in case we had to take off. But the man slowly started backing up and then hurried inside. We took this as an opportunity to leave, and we made our way to the gas station. We spent a while there talking about what happened, and how bizarre it was that he had just stopped. We bought some food and decided to head back to my house. On the way back, we saw a man walking towards us, ever so slowly. He was wearing a winter coat and skinny jeans. Yes, a winter coat and skinny jeans on a summer night. He was pretty far from us, because the path we were walking is a very long, straight path, so it's easy to see people coming from far away. By his height and his build, he was too young to be the man we ding-dong ditched. He was about our height, and judging by the fact that he was wearing skinny jeans, he was probably about 15 or 17. He had a very eerie look to him. The hood of his coat hid his face. As he approached closer, I started to get more uneasy and anxious. I spotted a path we could take to the side, and thought we could just take that and find another way home. The path just suddenly stopped after about 20 feet, and we were behind a hill. We decided to hide behind it and let the creepy man pass. I peeked over the top of the hill to see if he had passed, but the man was just standing there, looking straight ahead. Then I realized it was quiet. So quiet, no cars were passing and no crickets were chirping, just the breeze and my friend's breathing. I zoned out for a few seconds. Then, when I came back to reality, he was still standing there. And then he turned to look at me. Fear shot through my body, and I was terrified. I've never been so terrified. I had no idea why I was so scared. I almost shit myself, and I didn't even think about my friends when I just took off the other way and sprinted away from the man. To my luck, my friends followed. When we were a safe distance away, we decided to stop and catch our breath. I told them we could take a small tunnel that would let us loop around to my house. It was about a 15-minute walk, and we began walking up my street. We tried to hide in the shadows to avoid being seen if he was still around. But when we were about halfway to my house, I felt that uneasy feeling again, and this time, so did my friends. I turned around to see the same man following us. He was about 4 to 5 houses down behind us, so we had a pretty good distance between us. I told my friends that we were going to try and lose him, and that we were going to walk to another house so that he didn't find out where I live. Keep in mind that was mainly because I didn't want to get in trouble. Right after I finished telling them the plan, I turned around, and he was almost 20 fucking feet behind us. The fear and anxiety grew more and more the closer he got. There was no way someone could have caught up to us that fast without sprinting. He couldn't have run to catch up with us because we didn't hear any footsteps. It was still so quiet. We saw a car and we thought maybe if we signaled it to stop, he might leave us alone. The driver in the car sped past us and just ignored us completely. We were still wandering the neighborhood and finally came across a street with street lamps. As we passed under the street lamp, I turned to see if I could see the man's face. The split second he was under the light, I saw him. His eyes were pitch black, and right as I made that second of eye contact with him, I started freaking out. I started to breathe rapidly, and I could feel my eyes start to water because I was so fucking scared. A few minutes after I turned around, I heard him speak. His voice was deep and emotionless. He said,
"Don't be causing trouble."
That was it for me. I took off and headed home. My friends followed too. When we got back to my house, we tried entering as calmly as we could so my parents didn't get suspicious. We immediately headed downstairs and turned on a comedy movie to begin to calm down. We talked about what had happened, and my friends said they were scared shitless the whole time too. The only thing I cannot shake from my head is how fucking terrified I was. Whether it was some asshole fucking with us, or really a black-eyed kid, I will never truly shake that feeling of terror. As many things do, it started out innocently. My internet service provider used to have offices in a shopping center before they moved to their comparatively lush accommodations elsewhere. There was a drop box at the original location. The monthly bill was due, and so, there but for the grace of the net, I went. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I left. From my relatively isolated apartments, it's about 10 or 15 minutes to go downtown. Abilene has a population of about 110,000. Right next to Camelot Communications' old location is a $1.50 movie theater. At the time, the place was featuring the masterwork of modern film, Mortal Kombat. I drove by the theater on the way to the center proper and pulled into an empty parking space. Using the glow of the marquee to write out my check, I was startled to hear a knock on the driver's side window of my car. I looked over and saw 2 children staring at me from the street. I need to describe them with the one feature that I didn't realize until about halfway through the conversation. Both appeared to be in that semi-mystical stage of life children get into where you can't exactly tell their age. Both were boys, and my initial impression was that they were somewhere between 10 and 14 years old. Boy number 1 was the spokesperson. Boy number 2 didn't speak during the entire conversation. At least, not in words. Boy number 1 was slightly taller than his companion, wearing a pullover hooded shirt with a sort of gray checked pattern in jeans. I couldn't see his shoes. His skin was olive-colored, and he had a curly, medium-length brown hair. He exuded a quiet air of confidence. Boy number 2 had pale skin with a trace of freckles. His primary characteristic seemed to be looking around nervously. He was dressed in a similar manner to his companion, but his pullover was light green in color. His hair was sort of a pale orange. They didn't appear to be related, at least not directly. Oh great, I thought. They're gonna hit me up for money. And then the air changed. I've explained this before, but for the benefit of any new lurkers out there, right before I experience something strange, there's a change in perception that comes about which I describe in the above manner. It's basically enough time to know it's too late. So there I was, filling out a check in my car, which was still running, and in a sudden panic over the appearance of the two little boys. I was confused, but an overwhelming sense of fear and unearthliness rushed in nonetheless. The spokesman smiled, and the sight for some inexplicable reason chilled my blood. I could feel fight or flight responses kicking in. Something, I knew instinctually, was not quite right, but I didn't know what it could possibly be. I rolled down the window very, very slightly and asked, "Yes?" The spokesman smiled again, broader this time. His teeth were very, very white.
"Hey, mister. What's up? We have a problem,"
he said. His voice was that of a young man, but his diction, quiet, calm, and something I still couldn't put my finger on, made my desire to flee even greater.
"You see, my friend and I want to see the films, but we forgot our money,"
he continued.
"We need to go to our house to get it. Want to help us out?"
Okay. Journalists are required to talk to lots of people, and that includes children. I've seen and spoken to lots of them, and here's usually how that goes. Mister? Can I see that camera? I won't break it or anything, I promise. My dad has a camera, and he lets me hold it sometimes, I guess. And I took a picture of a dog. It wasn't very good, because I got my finger in the way, and adding some feet shuffling, or body swaying, you've got a typical kid talking to a stranger. In short, they're usually apologetic. People generally teach children that when they talk to adults, they're usually bothering them for one reason or another, and they should at least be polite. This kid was no way fitting the mold. His command of language is incredible, and he showed no signs of fear. He spoke as if my help was a foregone conclusion. When he grinned, it was as if he was trying to say,
"I know something, and you're not going to like it, but the only way you're going to find out what it is will be to do what I say."
Well, was the best reply I could offer. Now, here's when it starts to get strange. The quiet companion looked at the spokesman with a mixture of confusion and guilt on his face. He seemed in some way shocked, not with his friend's brusque manner, but that I didn't just immediately open the door. He eyed me nervously. The spokesman seemed a bit perturbed, too. I was still registering something wrong with both.
"Come on, mister,"
the spokesman said again, smooth as silk. Car salesmen could learn something from this kid.
"Now, we just want to go to our house, and we're just two little boys."
That really scared me. Something in the tone and diction again set off alarm bells. My mind was frantically trying to process what it was perceiving about the two figures that was wrong. Was all I could manage. I felt myself digging my fingernails into the steering wheel. "What movie were you going to see?" I asked finally.
"Mortal Kombat, of course,"
the spokesperson said. The silent one nodded in affirmation, standing a few paces behind. "Oh," I said. I stole a quick glance at the marquee and at the clock by my car. Mortal Kombat had been playing for at least an hour, the last showing of the evening, too. The silent one looked increasingly nervous. I think he saw my glances and suspected that I might be detecting something was not above board.
"Come on, mister. Let us in. We can't get into your car until you do, you know,"
the spokesman said soothingly.
"Just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll go to our mother's house."
We locked eyes. To my horror, I realized my hand must have strayed towards the door lock, which was still engaged. I was in the process of opening it. I pulled it away, probably a bit too violently, but it did force me to look away from the children. I turned back. I offered weakly, and then my mind snapped into sharp focus. For the first time, I noticed their eyes. They were coal black. No pupil, no iris, just two staring orbs reflecting the red and white light of the marquee. At that point, I knew my expression had betrayed me. The silent one had a look of horror on his face and a combination that seemed to indicate the impossible had just happened, and we've been found out. The spokesman, on the other hand, wore a mask of anger. His eyes glittered brightly in the half-bright light.
Come on, mister,
he said.
We won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun.
That last statement scared the living hell out of me, because at that point his tone was plainly saying, we don't need a gun. I noticed my hand shooting down towards the gear shift. The spokesman's final words contained an anger that was complete and whole, and yet contained in some respects a tone of panic.
We can't come in until you tell us it's okay. Let us in.
I ripped the car into reverse and tore out of the parking lot. I noticed the boys in my peripheral vision, and I stole a quick glance back. They were gone. The sidewalk by the theater was deserted. I drove home in a heightened state of panic. Had anyone attempted to stop me, I would have run on through and faced the consequences later. I bolted into my house, scanning all around, including the sky. What did I see? Maybe nothing more than some kids looking for a ride, and some really funky contacts. Yeah, right. A friend of mine suggested they were vampires with the old let us in bit and that we'll go see our mother thing. I'm still not sure what they were. So, it had been a slow trick-or-treat night in our neighborhood that evening, which is pretty odd in itself. We usually have kids from different areas dropped off in ours, and have a constant parade at our door. That night, I'd say we had no more than 8 or 10 groups of kids come by the entire night. It was about 9:30 p.m., and my husband and I were sitting in our family room watching some of those ghost shows based on supposedly actual events. Like I said, I don't believe in that stuff, but I do like a good ghost story now and then, and it was Halloween and all. We hadn't had any activity at the door in half an hour, and it was getting late, so we decided to turn the porch light off and let our dog Chloe out of her crate. Chloe is an American bulldog and is usually very docile. We only put her in her crate because we were afraid she'd try to get out and play with all the kids, and I didn't want to have to chase after her down the street. Also, we didn't want her to scare away any of the kids because she might look a little intimidating to the younger ones. So I turned the outside light off and let Chloe out, and she followed me back to the couch and laid down at my feet. It was getting close to 10 p.m. when my husband decided he'd had enough fun for the night and was going to go upstairs, take a shower, and get ready for bed. After all, it was Thursday, and he still had to get up early the next day. My teenage son was out with friends at a local haunted house and wasn't expected back for another hour or so that left me alone on the couch with Chloe. Now, just because I don't believe doesn't mean those shows don't freak me out a bit. And being alone now, watching, I'd have to say I was kind of on edge, as it were. It wasn't long after I heard the upstairs water for the shower turn on, when there came a light at the front door. My initial reaction was, what the hell, really? It's almost 10, go home. But soon an uneasy feeling came over me. Why the knock? Our doorbell glows, and in the dark and without the porch light on, it would have been extremely obvious to anyone there. I paused. I couldn't really just ignore it. Our front door has a big, beveled glass panel, and anybody right at the door could see in enough to see someone was in the family room watching TV. It would be pretty rude for me to just sit there and not answer it. Again from the door. I glanced down at Chloe, and she's gone. My gaze followed the usual path to the front door, expecting her to be on her way there as she normally does. Nothing. She wasn't there. I stood up and looked around the room better, and found her, crouching by the back door like she was wanting out. However, she never asks to go out like that. She always comes and licks my hand or puts her head on my knee. This was totally out of character for her, and heightened my anxiety. "Chloe, crate," I said. She just turned to look back at me like, "Hell no, lady, I ain't moving." I yelled up to my husband, but if he was already in the shower, I knew there was no chance of him hearing me. About that time, a car drove down our street and cast just enough light on the door to where I could see the silhouettes of 2 small children through the glass. I instantly felt relief. It was just some kids, probably a couple of my neighbors on their way back home and wanted to stop by and show me their costume or something. I headed to the door and looked back to make sure Chloe wasn't going to follow. What a great watchdog, I thought to myself as she just sat there. I turned on the porch light when I got to the front door, and sure enough, I could see through the glass that it was a couple of pretty small kids. A little late for such young ones, I thought, and began to wonder what kind of parents would let their kids run the streets that late at night. I only opened up the door enough to where I could block Chloe's escape if she decided to grow some balls, which was only about 2 feet. What struck me immediately as odd was the kids weren't wearing any costumes. They were just in normal street clothes. No customary trick or treat either. I began to feel very uneasy again. It was a girl and a boy. The girl, to my left, was older. I'd say about 11 or 12. I could tell she was blonde, but I couldn't make out any distinct features as our lights are from high above and on columns at the front of the porch, so most of the light was coming from behind them. I had not opened the door wide enough for any light from the inside to hit them directly. The boy was younger and about a foot shorter. I'd say 8 or 9, and he looked to have light brown hair. The girl very politely spoke up.
Ma'am, can we please come inside and use your phone to call our mom?
As she spoke, something in the pit of my stomach was telling me something was wrong. What kid, even at that age, doesn't have a cell phone of their own these days? I couldn't remember the last time I'd had anybody ask to use my home phone. Hun, don't you have a phone of your own you can call your mom on? I asked. This was when things got really weird. Both kids turned to look at one another like they were going to say something to one another. But they never spoke. They both turned back to me and the girl said,
Ma'am, my cell phone battery doesn't have enough charge left in it. Can we please come inside and call our mother? We're alone out here. My brother is scared.
I have to admit, there were two competing feelings going on inside me. First, that of a mother's heart that wanted to help these two small children get to their mom. The other, a sinking fear in my gut that was keeping the other feeling at bay. It was then that I noticed during the short conversation I'd already opened the door an extra few inches, which I was completely unaware of doing. I stopped. Honey, why don't you give me your mother's number, and I can call her myself? Another pause, and they looked again at one another. After a short moment, they turned back to me, and the girl said,
Ma'am, my little brother has to use your bathroom. Can we please come inside while you call our mom?
And with that last statement, the little girl moved closer towards the door, like she was going to just walk on by me. As she did, she stepped into the light coming from inside the house, and I got my first real look at her. Solid, jet black eyes. That's all I could see. That motherly instinct was gone and replaced by terror I don't think I've ever felt in my life. I could feel every hair on my arms and the back of my neck standing at attention. I closed the door to where just my face was able to stick out. The little girl stopped again and pleaded.
Please, ma'am, we're really scared and alone out here. We have to come inside. Please help us.
Then, like on cue, both kids began to whimper and cry. That's when the fear took over, and I shut and locked the door. I'll call your mom if you give me the number, I shouted through the door. But I'm not letting you in my house. Part of me wanted to run upstairs to my husband. But the bigger part didn't want to lose track of where they were. That would have freaked me out even more to not know where they were. After what seemed like forever, but probably was only a few seconds, I decided to call my neighbor that lives across the street. As I made my way to the other side of the table by our couch to my phone, I glanced at the back door. Chloe was nowhere to be found. We later found her in the guest room under the bed. When I got my phone and started to look for his contact info, it was only then that the kids stepped away from the door and began to walk around the street. As they did, I walked to the door to get a better look to see where they went, still not calling my neighbor. If you get close enough to the glass, you can see out enough to make out people's shapes, but you can't see much detail. Of course, standing that close to the door would make it pretty obvious to anyone outside looking in that you're there. From the door, I could see that the kids were still standing on the street lamp nearest my house, staring at me. As I lifted the phone up to my ear after calling, only then did the kids start walking down our street. I met my neighbor out under the lamp once he was out there, but the kids were nowhere to be seen. Like I said, I don't believe in any of this stuff, and I've never even heard about black-eyed kids before talking to my friend. What I really think is these kids were just out yanking people's chains on Halloween night. But I will say this for them, they were good. Really good. They scared the shit out of me and my dog. Hey guys, Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you all for watching the video, especially if you made it to the end. If you liked the video, please feel free to like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest content on the channel. If you have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave a comment below and tell me what I can do to improve, because I'm always looking to provide you guys with better and better content. Also, if you have any stories you'd like me to read or any stories that you want to send in that are your personal stories, please feel free to send them to either my Facebook, Twitter, or my Gmail account. All of them are in the description of the video below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.